Breaking news out any moment. The court decision on President Trump's travel halt for the 7 terror hotspots. This is about the lower court's, basically district court's temporary restraining order on that travel ban. We also have protesters across the nation calling the president's refugee halt a Muslim ban and racist. There's a lot of moving parts to this story. What we do know now is that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals could weigh in on that temporary restraining order that was put in place by the Washington court against President Trump's travel ban. How do Middle Eastern leaders feel about this? Well, ahead of that, the decision, the president has been speaking with the leaders of Afghanistan, Qatar, Kuwait, and Iraq. He's already spoken to the leaders of Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Egypt. Iraq is one of the countries banned under his order. Joining me now to discuss is the president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy and co-founder of the Muslim Reform Movement, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. So, Doctor, there's a lot of breaking news here. It's coming thick and fast. What could happen is the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals could kick it back down to the district court and say, fix it. It's a temporary restraining order. Is it indefinite? Fix that, your order. But how do you feel about our people in the Middle East and leaders in the Middle East? They are feeling like we're hearing that some of these leaders want to destroy ISIS. They're sort of like you say, some of these countries, though, are both the firefighters and the arsonists. Now, what do you mean by that?
Well, basically, the short term, President Trump is doing the right thing, which is rebuilding the coalition of countries that are fighting ISIS with us, the Saudis, the Qataris, the Emirates, and Turkey, etc. But we can't forget, Liz, that the ideology of those countries, they're Sharia states. The Saudis are Wahhabists. The Emirates are run by Islamic law. So they're both the firefighters against ISIS, but they're also the distributors of the ideology that radicalized the populations in Syria. While we were asleep in the last 8 years, the Syrian rebellion was radicalized by billions coming from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, etc. So we have to be careful. We should understand that short term, they're with us. Long term, they're actually the drug distributors that we need to fight ideologically.
Well, then how do you stop that?
That's where we need to work with Muslims in the West that are living in laboratories of freedom that can counter this sort of caliphism, Islamic supremacism, and realize that the establishment globally is the problem in our Islamic community, be it the countries or the clerics, but rather those of us on the ground that want to reform against both pathways of fascism, be it theocratic fascism or secular fascism of Assad, al-Sisi, or the old fascism of Saddam Hussein. All of those have to go away and be fought with a third pathway of liberty, and it's a long battle. It's the new Cold War, and we have to have a long-term strategy and change the axis.
Doctor, you make such a good point, because is the president or the administration, are they doing vetting based on ideology? In other words, when they are vetting refugees coming into this country, are they vetting based on Sharia law and how those individuals feel about Sharia law and the ideology?
That's why that's the question that should be asked. People are saying, oh, we've been vetting unbelievably. You have all the people in the Homeland Security saying they've been getting 18 months of vetting. It's done right. Well, it's about background checks. It's about biometrics. It's not about jihadism. It's not about caliphism. Our Muslim Reform Movement has a 2-page declaration that talks about the equality of men and women, Western ideas of universal human rights. If people are coming here, we should welcome them. I mean, now Germany is deporting tons back because they accepted anyone in without ideological vetting, and thus what happens is I think it's more anti-Muslim to let anybody in and then start showing your country you're deporting many Muslims out rather than vetting them appropriately for those who share our values, and that actually is more pro-Muslim and pro-Islam.
Yeah, you make a great point, because Doctor, the president has said about this extreme vetting, they don't want people in the country who are for honor killing of women. That's where the Democrats fail. The real war on women is happening in the Middle East. But, Doctor, some in the Muslim world are furious at the president's executive order. So is it risky for these leaders in the Middle East to be working with the Trump administration?
No, they've actually accepted far fewer refugees in Saudi or Qatar than the United States has, so they're not being labeled anti-Muslim, they're anti-ISIS, and if anything, that's a sign of their own tyrannies rather than them being anti-Muslim. So we need to set the standard on how to separate out those who share values of freedom and modernity from the Islamists. So I think they're able to be larger picture, if you will, rather than the narrow picture of the political gamesmanship that's happening in the courts in America, that's happening in the agitation propaganda coming from the left, that is really not looking at the bigger global picture of not only a battle against ISIS, but where the House of Islam is in its time in history right now.
All right, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time, sir. Breaking news, we're moments away from a